Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Second and Saints. John Hendricks alongside Ross Jackson. It's a beautiful, crisp Saturday in New Orleans. The weather's starting to get a little bit warmer, which I think is good for Ross. For me, I'm like,
Great for me.
keep it cold. But Ross, my man, how are you doing this weekend?
I'm good, man. I'm good. I'm excited for this weekend. I think this is going to be a very fun situation.
Fun is probably a good way of putting it for sure. I mean, look, we know what's coming, right? Like the Saints, they're 5-8. They're taking on the Commanders, 8-5. Commanders are like a 7.5 point favorite here. Dan Quinn, Jayden Daniels coming back to the Superdome. Marshawn Lattimore is going to make his debut for the Commanders, and then here's the Saints. Jake Haener is going to be their quarterback for Sunday. I think that they kind of knew this early on, but they obviously, I don't want to say a shtick, but leading on like, oh, we'll make the decision later, all this other stuff. But, Haener is the starter. He's going to lead this team. I think he has a lot of confidence in him. But, I guess my first thing would be, why did they pick Haener over Rattler? And are you surprised at this point?
No, I'm not super surprised. I think that the idea of going with Jake Haener makes a lot of sense. They got to look at Spencer Rattler early on in the season. I made the contention that, or not the contention, but I made the case rather, that starting Spencer Rattler again would have made sense, but that both options made sense. Like there was no wrong decision here for New Orleans, in my opinion, between Spencer Rattler and Jake Haener. You either get a chance to see Spencer Rattler with a full starting offensive line, or you get an opportunity to finally see Jake Haener prepare as a starting quarterback. So I think that that's going to be a big part of what this is. It's an opportunity to get to see who Jake Haener is as a starter, as opposed to coming in relief. And I think that that's a smart choice by New Orleans to get an evaluation of both young quarterbacks this season.
Right. I feel you. And the thing is, when this all happened, when Carr got hurt against the Chiefs, I mean, I thought that Haener would be the guy that they end up going with, but they chose
Mhm.
Rattler, which, look, I wasn't upset at it either of that. Like, I'd love to see both of these guys in action to see what happens. And then, with Haener, better late than never, I guess, if you will. Rattler
Mhm.
sample size, I think you just make all these correlations like, okay, what if Rattler had the full starting offensive line? What if Haener has Chris Olave in the mix, or all
Right.
these other different things that, or where's Taysom Hill and all this other stuff. Like there's all sorts of
Mhm.
things that you can bring here. But the bottom line is, with Jake Haener, he's been patient, he's been waiting, he's got this shot now, and look, the guy is confident as everything. And what's funny is you asked the question, he was interacting. He's like, what if I got to lose? Right, we're
Right.
five and
Yeah.
eight. I'm just going to go out there, play football, be confident. He's always got that chip on his shoulder because he's, kind of, I guess you would say, an underdog, so to speak.
Mhm.
Not being facetious or anything, but again, he's a guy that you can tell the confidence is there. He was obviously disappointed that he didn't get the start at the beginning, but he just kept going in the process. And look, we talked about it on this show way back when. One of the things that I remember he told me is like, when the season was over, he kept working. Like he was
Yep.
been working through the entire offseason. And the only break that he had for that was when he went to Paris. And then that's when he found out he had to face the skin cancer on his face and all this other stuff. But look, I think Haener is really exciting. I think they both have a lot of similarities, but their difference in the way they play is pretty noticeable.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I think Jake Haener does a good job of getting the ball out quickly. He's a very fast processor. It's always been a part of his game. And I think that he does have a little bit of the mobility. He can extend plays and all those other things. I think that like you have the usual rookie stuff. I mean, not rookie, but the usual like first time starter stuff that you're going to see, right? Like feeling pressure when it's not there,
Mhm.
a little bit of unfamiliarity with the speed of the game and stuff like that. But the good news for Haener is that he's gotten the opportunities to come in second halves, get an idea of what the speed of the game actually feels like. So he might be a little bit more adjusted to that than your typical first time starter and everything. So I think all that kind of stuff kind of boils into it. But we asked him, what kind of player should Saints fans be expecting? And he said he's going to be confident. He's going to go out there and let it rip. He's going to go out there and sling it. So, I mean, this is a guy that's coming in, and we've always talked about his confidence, right? We saw that during training camp in Irvine, especially. But like
Mhm.
we've always seen that confidence, and I don't think that this is going to be a game where the Saints are necessarily going to come in and say, okay, we're just going to run the football. I think they're going to
Mhm.
have to give Jake Haener his opportunities to go out there and throw. And so that confidence is really going to get an opportunity to ring through there. I don't know how successful it's going to be, if I'm being
Right.
honest. Like typically, first time starts for day three guys, not very successful, but or aren't guaranteed to be successful by any stretch of the imagination. But man, like if you need something here, you got a run game, you got a starting offensive line, and you got a ton of confidence at quarterback. I'm excited to see what he's going to be able to do.
Well, and everybody wants to be Brock Purdy, but that's just not the
Right.
case here, right? Like,
You
and for
Purdy's
the
Brock.
what's that? Exactly. So again, and one of those things where you look at the Commanders. I mean, they have a top 5 passing defense, only
Mhm,
giving up 191, less than 191 yards a game through the air. They're getting Marshawn Lattimore back, so they're presumably
mhm.
going to get better. And so this does pose a little bit of a problem for Jake Haener, in the sense that passing's great, but he's going to have to be quick decision. He's going to have to process things quickly, which he said, being in this offense, and he really tipped a lot of a hat. And again, I'm pretty sure it was you that asked him about Andrew Janoko and kind
Yep.
of the influence that he's had on him. And so I'm not going to steal the thunder, but kind of share a little bit about what he said when it came to Janoko, because I know a lot of people don't really know these guys on the coaching staff, but we've taken a lot of time of getting to know them and being these behind the scenes figures too.
Yeah, yeah. My two highlights from his answer to that question were when Janoko first got hired. He like continued. Jake Haener continuously reached out to him and saying like, "Hey, what are we doing when this happens? Like, how are we reading this? Like, what are we doing? All this other stuff." And then Janoko's like, "Bro, it's March. Like, leave me alone. Like, we don't. I don't know. Like, I don't even know the offense yet, man. Like, chill out, and everything." And so like, you could kind of feel sort of the hunger for development, the hunger
Mhm.
for knowledge, and everything that Haener displayed in that. And then the other thing that I thought that was really cool that he highlighted was how much Andrew Noko looks like he shows up and just loves his job.
Mhm.
And just comes with an energy and everything that is infectious. And I think that that is something that's huge for guys like Derek Carr, Spencer Rattler, and Jake Haener, and now Ben DiNucci, who get to experience that, come in and not only uh, be excited to come into work themselves, but be excited because the guy that they're working with is incredibly excited and ready to go and like loves the job and everything like that. And so I think that that goes a long way when it comes to developing these guys, because there's no quicker way to lose kind of the lose ground in development than to have somebody not want to develop. And I think every one of these guys wants to develop when they get to work with a guy like Janoko.
Yeah, he's one of those. I mean, we talk about so much with the Saints and their coaching staff, and what it looks like that a lot of these coaches are coaching for a job. But he's been one of the guys that obviously have made a big impact. We saw it early on with Spencer Rattler and rookie minicamp, just how different the tempo was with the working of the quarterbacks. I mean,
Hmm.
they're doing things that we've just never seen, and the vocality, if that's really the word, how vocal he was just one of those things where you caught on to it, where he's just on purpose. They're doing drills that are just out of this world. I mean, we were watching practice on Friday. They're rolling these like donut things, and the quarterbacks are
Right.
basically having to scramble out to the opposite side, make a crazy throw on the run, which Ben DiNucci had some killer throws, but
Oh,
Haener is
crazy
doing
zip.
really well on it. But it's just these elements where, again, for the average fan who doesn't really see a lot of that, like there's a certain appreciation we have that we get to see for it. And we saw a lot of that during training camp. And look, Jake and Spencer, they both did really well in training camp. Like, I don't want
Hmm.
anybody to misinterpret. Like, they both had their great days. And look, I know people are disappointed that Spencer's not going to get this opportunity. I know Spencer's disappointed that he's not going to get this opportunity. But at the same time, again, what does this team have to lose? And at the same time, you get a chance to at least look at what you have in Jake Haener. And I think that's pretty exciting for a team that's not going to rebuild, but also can a little bit assess what they have if beyond this year or something changes, that they know what they have in this quarterback room.
Yeah, I have to agree with that. Like, no matter how this goes, good, great, poorly, not so great. However it goes, it influences and gives the New Orleans Saints information about what they have to be ready for post Derek Carr. Because I don't think Derek Carr's signing an extension in New Orleans. I don't think that there's any situation where Derek Carr is your starting quarterback for the next 5 to 10 years. His age kind of already makes like rules that out of the question. And so you don't really have a surefire long-term option on your roster right now. And Spencer Rattler had 3 games. Unfortunately, during that time, unfortunately for him, didn't really get a chance to, didn't really do things that proved that he would be that long-term option. And we know how quickly the NFL moves, right? So you can consider that unfair to Spencer Rattler. Totally fine. It's unfair to everybody. The NFL moves very quickly when it comes to these young quarterbacks. And then now you get maybe a game. We'll see how many games Jake Haener actually gets here to find out if they feel that they have something there that becomes an option post-Carr, or if they feel like they have no option at that point post-Carr. And it sucks. It sucks that that decision might be made off of 1 game for one guy and 3 games for another guy. But that's unfortunately the way that the NFL works. And that's how quickly things change. And especially with a new head coach on the way, potentially, i.e., like unless Darren Rizzi gets the full-time gig, that's going to have an impact. So I think that's the thing that kind of works here for New Orleans, is that they'll have gotten an opportunity to see every quarterback that they have on their roster that's a viable option for the future, to find out if they truly are viable options for the future.
I don't think they need to add to the room. Like, I'd be happy with them bringing the same people back, which, look, we expect Derek Carr to be back.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, that's just, I mean, financially, we know, and then the no trade clause, all this other stuff. Like, let's not kid ourselves that Derek's most likely the starting quarterback for this team in 2025, and whether you feel great about that or not. But, look, when Spencer Rattler came on board, I don't know that anybody like realistically said, okay, well, Rattler's going to be this guy that just comes in, and you always want like a CJ Stroud situation or a Jalen Hurts or something. But Rattler was a quarterback that needed some time to develop, and they
NFL
needed
Rookie
to
Watch would have to disagree with you, buddy.
Fair, right? Like, and of course.
Many scouts are saying.
Yeah, well, you know what? The mini scouts that weren't in training camp. That's the funny part. Because we were there, and I guarantee you they weren't there. So, but anyways, I digress. But look, again, I like the concept of Rattler next year too, or the next 2 years or something. Same thing with Jake Haener, but you're going to have to, like, this is the growing pains. Again, you don't hit it right off the bat. And look at Bryce Young. He was struggling. He was playing like crap for all intents and purposes.
Right.
And obviously this year was tough for him. But when he was able to come back in, you see a completely different quarterback. And I think that was one of the things where I'm like, okay, could Spencer Rattler do that against Washington? I think it's a tough ask because it's Washington. They're a really good defense. Dan Quinn has an excellent defense at his disposal. But at the same time, let's see what they have in Jake Haener. And I feel like for fans, he's a guy that I think both Spencer Rattler and Jake Haener, you can get behind these guys. Like, you see them in interview, you see their, like what Dennis Allen used to say, their moxie, or the way they carry themselves, the attitude, the confidence. That's what I want in a quarterback. Like, I'm going to go out there and ball. Like, okay, I love that. But, a lot has to go right for New Orleans to be able to win this game.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And look, it's going to really, like, the quarterback conversation is the quarterback conversation, but really the success in this game comes from the run game for New Orleans, I think. I mean, they're going to be going up against the 27th ranked rushing defense in the NFL, and Daron Payne, one of their key defensive linemen, just went on the injury report with a back injury on Friday, did not participate, and is now questionable. So a midweek injury for the team that the New Orleans Saints are playing against, as opposed to the New Orleans Saints. So that's a good sign. But that's big. Now, the Saints were going up against the number 29 ranked run defense last week that had just lost Dexter Lawrence for the season on its defensive line, and they did not take advantage of that. So they'll need to take advantage of it here against Washington. But I think that becomes the biggest thing, outside of course, the defense and Jayden Daniels and the run game and all those other things. That's going to be the other kind of big question mark this weekend.
Yeah, offensively, like, too many negative plays last week. Like, you got to get in your bag, and this is a team that you can't leave it anything out there. And so I feel like they can shock some people. I know that New Orleans, the way that they're tracking, obviously they're not going to get in the postseason. And, look, if Derek Carr starts this game, I don't know what the outcome could be here, but at the same time, New Orleans just continues to be riddled with injuries and such, and they're going to have to play a nearly perfect game to be able to upset Washington. And look, I know we got plenty more to talk about that, but we will need to make sure to get a word from our sponsor. A word, not a lurd.
No, I like
A
alert.
word. Hey folks, John Hendricks here, Second and Saints. Wanted to talk to you quickly about Underdog because it is the place to play if you're a sports fan looking to win money while watching sports. With over 5 million happy players and $2 billion won, Underdog makes it fun and easy to cash in on all your favorite athletes' performances. Compete against other players by just selecting higher or lower on 2 or more player stats, and you could win up to 1,000 times your money. So turn every touchdown into a win with Underdog. This season, Underdog is going to be running a special promo or bonus almost every single day, like profit boosts, discounts, or free picks. Plus, all new users get a free pick. You could win up to 1,000 times your money just by choosing higher or lower on player stats like passing yards, interceptions, touchdowns, and much more. Create entries with all football selections or mix and match across your favorite sports. Underdog puts the power to cash out in your hands. Now you can either keep riding with your entry or tap the win now button to cash out whenever you want. And with Underdog Rescues, you can get your money back and receive a promo if an early injury causes your entry to lose. With Underdog's double flex option, you can even take 2 L's and still have your entry to be a win. So go download the app today and use code Second Saints to get up to $1,000 in bonus cash instantly. That's code Second Saints. Now here comes the legal jargon. Must be 18 or older, 19 and older in Alabama and Nebraska, 19 and older in Colorado for some games, 21 and older in Massachusetts and Arizona, and present in the state where Underdog Fantasy operates. Terms apply. Void in Colorado. Concerned with your play? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit www.ncpgambling.org. Arizona, 1-800-NEXT-STEP, 1-800-639-8783, or text NEXT STEP to 53342. New York, call the 24/7 Hope line at 1-877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY 467-369. Back here on Second and Saints, John Hendricks alongside Ross Jackson. Ross, before we go to the break, I mean, we're talking about not my word fumbles, but obviously we're talking about the Saints offense and just kind of the things that they need to do here, right? And I think that, again, we know on the opposite side, and we'll talk about that shortly, but for the Saints offense, I mean, what has to go right for them to even be in a position to say, okay, maybe they can tend to stick toe-to-toe with Washington or at least make this interesting?
Yeah. I think pass protection has to be a big part of it. And for all the struggles that the Saints had in the run game last week, they were awesome in pass protection. Like I know that they had the one sack that they gave up to Brian Burns, but that was like Brian Burns on 2 tight ends. He split the tight ends, got the sack. Like, okay, sure. But
Mhm.
I think it was the only 6 pressures according to Pro Football Focus that the Saints gave up on offense. So I think that pass protection absolutely has to be there, and then the run game has to be there for sure as well. I think that's got to be the biggest thing. And so that partnership or that complement um, between Alvin Kamara and Kendre Miller, who Alvin Kamara missed the first 2 days of practice, was back on Friday, no designation, good to go, just missed with illness. But the complement between the two of them has got to be kind of on point again this week. And I think those 2 things are the things that at the absolute base, like foundation, have to be right in order for the Saints to really even find themselves in this game.
And I'm going to say this, the same thing I said when Spencer Rattler started. It's on Clint Kubiak to make Jake Haener comfortable early on in this
Mm-hmm.
game. You don't need
Good
him
call.
to have to play from behind 21 points. Like, you need to put him in a position to win. I know he's talked a lot about working with some of the tight ends. Like, he's got familiarity with a guy, like a Mason Tipton or something.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if Tipton's going to play in this game, but what's his chemistry like with Kevin Austin Jr.? He talked about Marquez Valdez-Scantling and some of the work he's been able to put in with him. And so, again, I think that's the biggest thing for me is get Haener comfortable early. And look, everybody we talk to, even Rattler, just whoever, and when it's a rookie, and I think Kendre Miller was like this too when he came back. It's like, just get that first hit out of the way, right? Like, just get that first hit that you take, and then everything will kind of just be able to fall in place there. And so I think for New Orleans, it does start up front. It's going to be a trench type game, right? Like, we know it on both sides that this is where they're going to win or lose is in the trenches. And again, it's kind of like football 101, but for New Orleans
Mm-hmm.
offensively, I would like to see a lot better run support, because I'll chalk up the Giants game to rust, right? Like Eric
Sure.
McCoy coming back, Lucas Patrick. Let's chalk that up to rust. But this, in theory, would be the game where you see this offensive line be able to kind of assert their dominance a little bit and hopefully be their best friend, because their best friend would be keep Jayden Daniels off the field. And you do that by having long, sustainable drives.
Yeah, yeah. I wouldn't be surprised if the first play of this game is a outside zone play action shot to the middle of the field. Not shot, but like intermediate shot to the middle of the field. That's what they did with Rattler most of the time. So they kind of started him off with kind of this nice, comfortable, get the pocket moving, play action, get your back, get your eyes out there, all that kind of stuff, and then be able to look towards the middle of the field. Other than that, I imagine it'd be like an outside zone run and then like an inside run with Kendra and then maybe a shot after that. But I wouldn't be surprised to see them do that. The reason why I think that this team does need, like John and I are sitting here and we're talking about like, oh, they need these things to kind of go perfect. One of the reasons why I think that that's the case is because like just looking at quarterbacks that were drafted in day 3 since 2017 that have started games, typically not successful. Just looking at a couple different percentages here, 35.1% win percentage over the course of all the games that those quarterbacks have played. So 46 quarterbacks were drafted that fit that category. Day 3 since 2017, that's rounds 4 through 7. 23 of those quarterbacks have gotten the opportunity to start some kind of game. So 50% of those quarterbacks, John, have seen action. And I think that has a lot to do with the sort of swelling of quarterback injuries and things like
Sure.
that we see right nowadays, and probably the careful nature that teams are taking when it comes to those injuries nowadays. But only out of those 23, only 5 won their first game. And you mentioned Brock Purdy earlier. Brock Purdy is obviously a huge factor in these numbers. Of the 185 games played and started by these quarterbacks, 35.1% win percentage. If you take Brock Purdy out of that factor, it's a 27.8% win percentage, 42 and 109 over the course of those 151 games. So this is why we're talking about why, like, yes, there's a lot of promise and there's a lot of fun things that could happen with a Jake Haener, but historically speaking, and look, it's okay to remove Jake Haener from this because we haven't seen Jake Haener start a game yet, right? But what we're just looking at is kind of like the trend of what happens when a day 3 drafted quarterback starts games. Typically, they only win about a quarter of the time if their name's not Brock Purdy. So it's a challenge here for Jake Haener. And of course, it comes down to more than just a quarterback. It comes down to the other pieces around, which is why we're discussing like some of the other things that have to happen around him in order for the Saints to be able to win this game.
And look, Derek Carr's not been put on IR.
Right.
He's doubtful going into this game, and it's not necessarily like the concussion protocol. Only one step, and that's like a practice, if you will. And then he's not asymptomatic or anything like that, or he's asymptomatic. So it's one of those where it's interesting that he's not ruled out. Like I feel like they did this again when the last time. I don't know if this is going to be Jake's only start, like because you got Green Bay right behind you on the Monday Night Football game. But that's also an extra day. Again, Derek's going to try to do everything he can to get out here, but this may be the only start Jake Haener has. And again, if he plays well, I don't know that you rush Derek back and say, okay, well, he has to play against the Packers because it's cold weather. I don't know, whatever narrative you want to say, but what does a good day look like for Haener to say, okay, let's at least turn to him and let us give a chance against the Packers?
Yeah, I love that question. 60% of passes completed, I think, is going to be a big benchmark right now. His career sits at 48.3%, excuse me. But that's him coming in relief and stuff like that. It's very different. You don't have a rhythm and all those other things. So I would say completing 60% of his passes is big, like 200 passing yards, and then like a pair of total touchdowns, right? It could be a rushing touchdown on a short yard situation. It could be a passing touchdown. It could be 2 passing touchdowns, 2 short rushing yards, whatever, it doesn't matter. But just like seeing him move the ball well with the offense and the offense be able to operate around him. 60% of his passes completed, around 200 passing yards, 2 total touchdowns. And then ideally, and this is something he's done very well, no turnovers. Like, or at least no turnovers contextually, right? If you put a pass perfectly placed for a wide receiver and then the ball bounces off the hands of that receiver and into the hands of a defender, there's context to that, right? So what I mean is like turnover worthy passing and everything like that, you want to keep to a minimum, but he's done a pretty good job of that. But I think that's all you really need. Like, this isn't a situation where you need a guy to go out there and throw for 350 yards and 5 touchdowns and everything. And if that happens, awesome, super fun.
Yeah,
I'm there for
crazy.
But like, that's not necessarily what you need if you're Jake Haener, in my opinion, to earn the opportunity to start again next week if Derek Carr's not ready to go.
Yeah, and I'd agree. I don't think it has to be this earth-shattering day. And again, if they can lean on the run and establish that,
Right.
it helps. I mean, you look at how they stumbled last year under Pete Carmichael and all that. Just set yourself into third and manageable. right?
Yep.
Get your first and second down. I'm okay with some aggressiveness. I think that he has the ability to be able to lead and be aggressive in some of these aspects. Again, I think Spencer's probably got a much better deep ball on it, but Haener's got
Mhm.
a lot of quickness and his zip's pretty good too. And so again, I don't expect him to just start saying, "All right, well, MVS is down there somewhere. Let's just chunk it down or something." You know what I
Right.
mean? But I think his is going to be that short to intermediate type of game, and it's much of what we saw in training camp too. Is where he's going to be able to shine a little bit. So I'm with you. I think for him, it doesn't have to be some crazy performance like a Tua or a Patrick
Right.
Mahomes at their best or a Josh Allen. Like he doesn't
Mhm.
need that. Two total touchdowns sounds about right. 200 yards in the air would be fantastic, and 50 to 60% completion. I think that's more than admirable for him. So we've talked about a lot about the Saints offense, mainly Jake Haener, but
Yeah.
shifting to the Saints defense, which is going to be having their hands full, right? So Jayden Daniels comes to town. Now, look, Washington, if you didn't know, before their bye week, they were able to beat up on the Titans. Whoop de doo. That was their get right game. But before that, they had lost three straight. One of
Mhm.
those they shouldn't have lost to the Cowboys. That was the craziest thing I think I've seen in a long time, other
Yeah,
than
that
their
was
Hail
rough.
Mary that they had against the
Right.
Bears. But Jayden Daniels, I don't want to just say, oh, dual threat quarterback, but he can throw the ball extremely well, but
Yes.
he can also move, evade, do all the things. And so for the Saints defensive line, you saw what happened last week to Drew Lock. This has always been a common problem for the Saints is you got a quarterback who can take off. So coverage great downfield, but here comes Drew Lock running for 20 something yards or
Right.
whatever the case may be. Jayden Daniels poses a similar threat, but obviously he's got exponentially more talent than one of the most talented quarterbacks the Saints have faced all year.
Oh yeah, 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 without a doubt. I think you have to put him up there with like the Jalen Hurtses in
Mhm.
terms of the caliber of quarterback that the Saints have faced so far this season. Yeah, the Drew Lock one, like if you look at some of the runs that Drew Lock had during the game, including the one where he inexplicably just turned right for no reason and just decided he didn't want that first down anymore. Uh, like a lot of those are house calls for Jayden Daniels, like
Mm,
or close, like they're big breakaway runs for Jayden Daniels, and so like that's where the Saints are going to have to be very disciplined. And that's where potentially the return of Tano Passanio, if that could happen.
mm,
We've seen DeMarco Jackson not practice this week. Is if he's a candidate for IR, that opens up the spot for Tano Passanio, who could potentially come in for this game. And so we'll see how the Saints manage it. But you're looking at the opportunity, or you're looking at the need here for lane integrity, eye discipline, and then maintaining sort of these rush lanes, but maintaining your ability to collapse these rush lanes and escape lanes for a Jayden Daniels. Because if he finds those, it's going to be tough. Now they're going to be without one of their top wide receivers in Noah Brown, which means they're going to have to find a
mhm,
second receiving option outside of Terry McLaurin. I expect it to be Zach Ertz, so it's going to be a big day for a guy like Ugo Amadi, for instance,
mm.
who will draw a lot of that tight end coverage. He quietly played like one of his best games of his career last week up against the Giants. He was awesome. Um,
It's crazy.
and so I'm looking forward to seeing what some of those matchups are going to be. But I think the biggest threat that Washington poses to New Orleans outside of their scoring potential as a top five scoring team is going to be their run game, right? Brian Robinson
Yeah.
Jr. and what Jayden
Mhm.
Daniels is able to do on the ground. It just raises the floor of that run game so much. And the Saints are not great against the run. They're not great against the rushing quarterbacks. And so I think that's going to be the key matchup in this one to watch out for.
Right, and what comes to mind is the almost sacks, like they got him
Yes.
right there, but then they just and Jayden
Yeah.
Daniels is one of those guys that can just get out of it. And look, you mentioned the run game. Brian Robinson Jr. is extremely talented. Obviously, Austin Eckler, if he was in this game, that would be even more of
Mhm.
an upside for him. But again, they have it's going to be fascinating to watch Terry McLaurin if he's going to go up against Kool-Aid or if he's going to go up against Alante, if they're just going to play sides. Like I'm curious to see what that looks like, and such. But I'm with you. I think Zach Ertz is going to be a big part of this game plan for Washington. And Jayden Daniels, if he doesn't see it, he's going to make it work with his
Mhm.
legs. And so again, I think Washington's are one of those teams where they're really scary at this point. And look, I feel like they're a team that's obviously going to be in the postseason. They need this game too, but for New Orleans, the defense that we saw last week, I mean, they did. a lot of good things against the Giants. But again, let's just take that for what it's worth. Drew Lock did not look good. They were able
Oh
to
yeah,
shut down
no.
Tyrone Tracy Jr., which is what I kind of expect them to be a focal point and stopping the run against Brian Robinson Jr. But it just goes more than that. Like McLaurin is much, with all respect to Malik Neighbors, Terry McLaurin's in a different category. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
Like he's definitely one of the top tier receivers, in my opinion, at least in this league. And so I think that that's going to be something if they can get the pass protection there. But look, Chase Young is coming off a game, and look, let's just say the revenge game factor, right?
Right.
Marshawn's one, but Chase Young, John Ridgway the third. But Chase
Hmm.
Young is coming off one of the best games he's played with the Saints, and like he was incredible last week.
Yeah, he was awesome. He tied a career high according to Next Gen Stats and pressures. He had 10 total pressures. Pro Football Focus actually counted it as 12. Different analytic sites count things differently. The
Right.
biggest thing, and he mentioned, I think it was on Wednesday when he spoke with New Orleans media, that like he feels like he's pass rushing better than he ever has throughout his career. The big thing is getting, you mentioned the almost sacks, is getting the sacks. I believe it was going into last week. He and Carl Granderson are the two defensive players with the least amount of sacks of all the players with at least 40 pressures in the NFL.
Mm.
And so I think that like that's the number that you'd like to see come up. But pressure is pressure. Pressure helps your secondary. Pressure helps your defense. Like there's nothing needs to be taken away from the success of that. You just like to see more of those plays end in sacks, but those guys have been really disruptive. However, I don't know that they're going to be very active as pass rushers in this game. I imagine a lot of it is going to be what we call mush rush, right? Where they
Mm.
end up putting themselves in position and hand fighting and staying in one place, or not staying in one place, but hand fighting to a landmark and then holding that landmark so they could easily shed and take up a rushing lane or an escape lane for Jayden Daniels. So I wouldn't be surprised to see that the pressures potentially tick down this week in the greater interest of maintaining the ability to be able to collapse those escape lanes that Jayden Daniels might look for in the run game.
Yeah, and again, he's going to be the focal point, and I just don't know. I think for New Orleans in this game, as we kind of look at, I don't think we have to guess here. We know who's going to win this game, right? Like we know who we'd at least predict to win this game.
Yeah, who
But
we
for New
predict. Yeah, yeah,
Orleans,
for sure.
it's a matter of can you keep up blow for blow with the Commanders? You know what I mean? Like
Right.
I know the Commanders, like when the Cowboys played them, the Cowboys weren't supposed to win that game, and it was Cooper Rush and all this other stuff. But special teams could be a leg up here, no pun intended, or anything like that. Like it's something
Nice.
that you could obviously benefit from here. That could be like a silent assistant here, and you know what the Rizzy magic is like with opposing field goal kickers and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So it's
And a
just
kicker like
result.
Washington kicker Zane Gonzalez was on the injury report all week with a left
Mm,
foot injury. He got a little
I
my left
mean,
foot going on. And so something to watch out for when it comes to that too.
yeah, and so I just think it's for them to go if they can stand toe to toe, if they can put themselves at least into be within two possessions. I guess is what I say. That's really
Yeah.
the thing. If you can keep it within one, great. But if you can realistically say, okay, we can at least weather some of the storm early, and then be able to try to at least keep it within the two possessions, I think the Saints could have an opportunity. Now, I don't know about you. I think Washington's going to win this game. I don't think anybody that would look at this game would think that the Saints are going to win. But I mean, I don't want to speak prematurely for you and just assume. But what do you think?
Yeah, no, I think it's Washington's game. I predicted Washington to win this game at the beginning of the season,
Yes. Okay.
honestly, and everything. And we didn't even know how good Washington was going to be
Yeah.
at that point. But the thing that I will say here though is the middle quarter is what I'm going to be watching. So that's kind
Hmm.
of 7.5 minute mark at the in quarter two to the 7.5 minute mark of quarter three, I think is going to be a really, really important area of this game. My good friend David Harrison, who's over at the Locked On Commanders podcast, talks a lot about the Washington approach, the Dan Quinn approach, being a lot like a boxing match, to where the first quarter is a lot of like feel it out. And then kind of the middle portion of the game, which is where we've seen the Saints take a little bit of a dip over the course of the season. And then the middle portion of the game is when they really come out trying to land the big punches. And then if they
Hmm.
can't land those punches and they get into the fourth quarter, then they kind of start to panic a little bit because it's like, oh no, we thought that was going to work. That didn't work. What do we do now? What do we do now? What do we do now? And then the second half Cliff Kingsbury stuff starts to happen. and or the late season, late game Cliff Kingsbury stuff starts to happen. So that's been sort of the rhythm of the Washington Commanders. So the other thing that doesn't have anything to do necessarily with offense or defense or special teams, just kind of all of it encompassing. If the Saints want to pull off an upset here, that middle quarter, from the middle of the second quarter to the middle of the third quarter, might be the most important spot where they have to do something that they haven't done much of throughout this season, which is outperform the team on the other side during that portion. If they can do that, they might be able to kind of get Washington back to a little bit of that lack of balance that they showed over the course of that 3-game losing streak.
All gas, no breaks. I mean, that's
All
literally
gas,
what
no
we've seen.
breaks.
And I don't know that we've seen a game like that other than Dallas, maybe. You know
Right.
what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
I don't think we've seen that out of this team. Is that, and again, regardless of whether it was Rizzy or Dennis Allen, like their third quarters just aren't good. Like they're a
Right.
team that, for whatever reason, when they come out of the half, they just don't look that particularly good, and so they're going to need it. They're going to need to pull out all the stops and be aggressive, do what they can. I mean, again, 5-8. What do you have to lose? You got to win this game. There is no like, we'll make it up next week, because you got the Packers right behind here. So these two
Right.
games, as we sit here and kind of close, if Rizzy manages to win these two next games, I don't think it's a debate anymore. I know Aaron Glenn is probably the guy, like the front runner. It's
Right.
funny you bring up Cliff Kingsbury. I think he might get some looks in the offseason. I'm not saying the Saints, but and you probably did it too, but when I looked at all these coaching candidates, Kingsbury is somebody that I think is going to get some looks, and Saints
Mm-hmm.
could look his way. But I'm with you. His second halves are kind of like, but
Yeah.
for New Orleans, if Rizzy could split these two and find out a way to win Washington, and if he loses the Packers, I think that's a win for him. But if he beats these next two games, especially with not having Derek Carr, especially not having Chris Olave, all this other stuff, I don't know that it's more of a question that Rizzy is not your next head coach.
If Rizzy wins in Green Bay in particular, like I think you're right. Like winning both of these games is huge for him. But if he wins in Green Bay in particular, it will remind me of the 9-0 victory that Dennis Allen had in, what was that, 2021? That was a Sunday night
Sean.
football game, if I remember
Yeah.
correctly.
Yep.
So it was a national TV win over, a surging Super Bowl team. Tom Brady led, all this other stuff, everything. And that became the marquee victory for Dennis Allen. And it remained the marquee victory for Dennis Allen throughout his coaching career.
Yeah.
And everything, like throughout his coaching tenure with New Orleans. But like that was the marquee thing. And so I highlight that as to say, like, the one marquee win doesn't necessarily guarantee success afterwards, as we saw. But like that Green Bay game, if Darren Rizzi wins that, if the Saints win that Green Bay game with Darren Rizzi, and especially if they can compound it with an upset against Washington, it changes the entire complexion of the conversation around Darren Rizzi. And it goes from, is he a viable candidate, to who's competing with Darren Rizzi for the head coaching spot. Like that would be huge for him. I don't see it happening,
Right.
but man, that would be huge. And especially that nationally televised Monday night, Green Bay, Lambeau Field, nighttime game, December 23rd, Christmas Eve. Like it's all there. You know what I mean? It's all the story. It's all the winter fantasy story or Christmas story or whatever you want to call it and everything. Like it's that would be huge for him. Huge.
And make no mistake about it, Green Bay, I mean, they're trying to keep pace with the Lions. I mean, they're right on your
Right.
heels, right? And so again,
Right.
it's not like a thing
Yeah,
where
they're no
Green
slouch.
Bay's going to be in the playoffs, right?
Right.
Detroit's going to obviously be in the playoffs, and Minnesota's probably another team that's going to be in the playoffs. I mean, the playoff bracket for the NFC is pretty clear, without the exception of what does the NFC West look like and what does the South look like. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like those are the two things that are yet to be determined. The Rams are surging right now. Seahawks are a team. Can they hold on? You know what I mean? It's a very
Said
important
Seahawks
game
are a
for the
team.
Packers. Yeah, I mean, but like
I
I
know what
just
you meant by that. I know exactly what you meant by that. Like they were a team that is doing this thing, but I just love to, like, the Seahawks are a team.
yeah,
Because that's really all you have to do to be competing in the NFC West, the NFC South, or the AFC South, is simply be a team.
Sure.
Uh,
Yeah. I mean, again, you saw what chaos the 49ers are in. I mean, Devondre
right.
Campbell, he just pulls the Antonio Brown
What's
and
that? What's that? I'm out of here.
yeah.
Who was it that retired at halftime for the Bills in that one
Oh
game? Vernon
gosh.
Davis. No, not Vernon
Yeah.
Davis.
Not Vernon Davis. Vernon no, 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 no. Oh gosh. Man, hold on.
It was a DB, right?
It was Vontae Davis. Vontae Davis.
Vontae
That's
Davis.
no, no, no,
Vontae.
no.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Micah Hyde. Micah Hyde. Wasn't it?
Oh,
or was it
no, it was
Vontae
Vontae Davis.
Davis?
It's definitely Vontae
Davis?
Davis. Yeah,
Yeah, no,
Vontae
no,
Davis
no.
definitely retired at halftime.
Yes,
He was like,
yes.
I'm out. I'm
Okay,
good."
that's what it was. Yeah,
He said, "I'm
yeah,
good."
that was bizarre. But again, I just think that you look at even if whoever makes it, like the South is not that strong. I mean, I picked the Bucks all along, but again, the Falcons continue to be in free fall mode, and Bucks are going to have a hard challenge with the Chargers this weekend. So I don't know how it plays out, but the only realistic path in this 1%, less than 1% chance for the Saints, which again, we're doing this again, but
Uh,
they have to win. They have to pull off basically two of the most improbable wins, and they would have to beat the Raiders, and they would have to beat the Buccaneers at the end of
yeah,
the year. It would set up a really interesting showdown at the end of the year. But again, if Rizzy can pull off these next two, I don't care what happens after that. Like those
man.
two games would prove that he should be it. But we'll see. I don't think when we talk on Sunday after the game, I think we're going to be talking about how the Commanders came in and imposed their will, and Saints just come up short and like they did, and we wouldn't be surprised by that. But if it does, I'm gonna tell you, it's gonna be
Oh
really
boy.
interesting here in New Orleans. But well, Ross, as we're wrapping up here, as always, you tell everybody what you got going on at Locked On Saints and LouisianaSports.net.
Yeah. Locked on Saints is already episodes up in terms of what to expect from Jake Haener's first start and all those other pieces over at Louisiana's. And then, of course, we'll be live after the game, just like we'll be live here after the game. And then over at LouisianaSports.net, I'm working on a deep dive piece. I shared some of the percentages and win percentages and things like that when it comes to um, day 3 since 2017 quarterback starters. I'm going to dive a little bit deeper into all of that in terms of like completion percentages and touchdown to reception ratio, like all those other things. And so I'll have that piece up later on Saturday to help get you primed and ready for Jake Haener's first start. What you got coming up, bud? Over at
Well, I
Saints
just
News
put
Network.
out a little editorial on Jake Haener, just kind of talking about what he said yesterday and or Friday. And look, again, go check that out. Just a lot of cool quotes and get to know Jake Haener a little bit. I guess is what I would say. And of course,
Hmm.
one of the things that I'm really trying to work on is this kind of rookie angle, and it's something that's more for the back half of towards the end of the year, but just kind of getting some of these rookies, their perspective, what they've learned, all these different things. So keep an eye out for that. That's going to be coming. So, but man, Ross, another show in the books. We're almost to 80 shows here at Second and
Dang,
Saints. So it's been crazy. Yeah, man. So
they let us do 80 shows.
I know, right? Like, man, it's nuts. And look, it doesn't happen without you guys at home. I really appreciate all
Mm-mm.
your support, and I know Ross does too. And look, we all have our own thing that's going on. There's a lot of people that do exactly what we do, and look, some people do it better, and some people do it, in their own flavor. But we're just us two, and that's what you get with it. It's us two whatever it comes to the table. You know what I'm saying? Like that's literally what it is. And so we just appreciate you guys tuning in. Obviously, don't forget to hit the like, subscribe button. A lot of fun stuff coming down the pipeline, and we hope you're here for it. So, Ross, any parting shots, thoughts, remarks before we get out of here?
um,
You
no,
had
man,
something
I'm
last
gonna
one.
keep the peace. I'm gonna keep the peace today.
Okay. We'll
I'm gonna
keep the
keep the
peace,
peace.
man.
Yeah.
Hey, nothing
Just
wrong
kidding.
with that.
Like I have something that would actually start trouble. Yeah, leave it to Ross to start trouble. Sure.
That's okay. All right. Well, on that note, let's not let Ross get in trouble, guys. Thanks so
Oh,
much for tuning in. We will talk at you very shortly. Be sure to stick with us and check us after the game. Thanks a lot. I'll have a good one. Thanks.
love you.